when we got this label done by Tony Austin Group, what he did is he used the signature of my grandfather and my uncle and kind of combined them. So I love it because it's in the background and it gives the, that
stamp of
just
approval.
Yeah, the stamp, the generations. So yeah.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me back at Wine for Me at Home. I am delighted to share with you some people that I just adore who are involved with a winery that I just adore. I had the privilege of meeting Julie Pedroncelli St. It's been a couple summers ago whenever Pedroncelli was celebrating 90 years. So this will tell you, Julie's not 90. She's third generation wine family, and she's joined by her husband, Ed St. John, and they together are working with Julie's family in creating and distributing beautiful, beautiful wines from Sonoma. Today, we're going to taste 3 Cabernet Sauvignons, and I am just delighted to have you guys with me. So cheers. Hello, hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Oh my gosh, I don't have wine in my glass. I'm going to go ahead and pour the 3 Vineyards Cabernet right into my glass so I can toast you right back.
Well, it's wonderful to be part of it. Wonderful to be part of this. Thank you so much. That's
cheers.
Cheers.
Officially,
all right, official cheers.
Clink. Cheers. There we go. Boom. So my family's property is located here in Dry Creek Valley, which is the northwest corner of Sonoma County, near the town of Guysville. And we've been here for 93 years. So Amy was there celebrating our 90th anniversary in 2017. And here we are in 2020, and we're still going strong.
I think it's absolutely amazing that your family was able to sustain the winery through Prohibition. I mean, your family's seen a lot in the winemaking world. I mean, it's amazing to me that you just keep on going, and it's got to be because you know about something that you're doing. So I'm really eager to hear about these 3 Cabernets that are grown so close together and that you said are going to be tasting very differently. So why don't you want to give us a little bit about the 3 vineyards? Tell us about it.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of history for Cabernet Sauvignon as it pertains to Pedroncelli. The second generation, my Uncle John and my dad Jim, had bought the winery from their parents in 1963. In 1965, they made a purchase of 5 acres of just off West Dry Creek Road. And we were the first to plant Cabernet Sauvignon. That's the variety that my uncle chose in Dry Creek Valley.
Okay.
So that little piece we'll talk about with our 3rd Cabernet. But it started our venture with this particular grape. And we now plant almost equal amounts of Cabernet Sauvignon and Zinfandel, that we consider them our flagship wines. And so we're starting with the Cabernet Sauvignon, the king of the red wine grapes. It is the most widely planted red wine grape in Dry Creek Valley, as well as California itself. And it is just, here in Dry Creek Valley, it has this great combination of the climate and the soils where this vineyard is located. But we started with the 3 vineyards. So just take a little step back, talk about it. Interestingly enough, it's a Bordeaux blend. So we've got Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cab Franc, a little Petit Verdot, a little Malbec. And it's all part of estate vineyards. All of our Cabernets are estate grown. This one was planted later on. So we're talking 1990s now at this point.
Oh, wow.
And the 3 vineyards, so it's a well-established.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny to say 1990 or late 80s and think it was just recently planted.
Was that just yesterday?
30 years ago now. You know?
Oh my
So this grows on a little bench on Dry Creek Road. So anyone who's been to Sonoma County, been to our area, it actually grows right along Dry Creek Road. All 3 of these Cabernet Sauvignons come from about 300 yards from each other. But it'll be fun as we taste through them to notice the real differences that you can discuss in each of them. The same variety growing so close together, you'd think that the soils and the climate would lend to exactly the same flavor profiles. And in fact, it was a conversation that I had with Julie's dad one time. And this is 10, 15 years ago, when we didn't have quite the distinctive differences in these wines. And he said, well, it's pretty tough to make different wines when the grapes grow side by side.
Very practical.
Very practical. To me, and I've said before, as we talk through the Cabernet Sauvignons, I really like to think of them as 3 different cuts of beef.
Okay.
The 3 vineyards I think of as my strip steak. And if you're a strip steak, now if you're from California, it's a New York steak. If you're from Missouri, Kansas area, it's a strip steak. So I always am careful to say a strip steak. That wonderful cut of beef that is so textural. And if you're a New York lover or a strip steak lover like I am, when I eat in New York, the thing I love about it is the bite of the meat. It's got some tooth. Is the best way I can say it. It's not tough, but it has really nice texture.
Right.
And when I taste this wine, to me, that is the thing that just jumps out at me. This is a really textural wine. I think it's the blend really of all of them. The Cab giving you the wonderful flavors and aromas, the Merlot giving you a little bit of softness, the Petit Verdot giving you the dark, the Cab Franc giving something that I think we get a lot of in Dry Creek Valley, and that is this really nice dried herb character. So you get some sage, you get some oregano, maybe a little thyme. You're just getting these really nice dried herbs.
Right, absolutely.
So I want you to tuck that in the back of your mind. This is our strip steak, of the Cabernets. Yeah.
Well, you touched on something, and Julie and I talked about this before, that so often when people look at a label and they see Cabernet Sauvignon, they don't realize that so many other grapes can go in there as long as 80% is Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's interesting to me, all the other things you can add in. And you're right, it does add a little bit of bite, but bite can often sound negative. It's the texture, the herbal bit to it, a different flavor that you're able to add. And I think that's interesting. And for people to know that even though it says Cabernet Sauvignon, it's a Bordeaux blend that's in the bottle. And I love that.
I'll add a little bit to what we're talking about, bite, just to kind of give everybody, I was on a visit with a fellow in Chicago who is a wine buyer for a restaurant. And he and I were chatting about the texture of our wines. And he said, you know what this reminds me of? When your grandma used to do this, your cheeks? He goes, that's what your wines do. They go, it's like a little hug, a little pinch from your grandma, because it really does. When you're talking about texture and you're talking about, yeah, you get that.
For real? That is, yeah.
Isn't that funny?
I said, I'm stealing that for the rest of the time. It's a great description. It helps us understand, I often talk about when I taste wine, it hits all the bases. And for me, that's kind of what I'm talking about. I get the flavor, you get that little touch of that bite, and you get that beautiful texture. So anyway.
Well, we've always talked about
good description.
Julie's Uncle John used to talk about wanting to have a little grip. And we call it the Italian grip.
Grip. And that also.
When I was thinking about grip, though, I was always thinking about the grip in my mouth, my tongue, skidding across the roof of my mouth or my lips, and that's from the tannin. Right. And that's also what makes that's what makes it go so well with strip steak, is because the fat then helps smooth that back out, and the grip or the tannin cleans your palate up and gets you ready for the next bite, so you can taste again. Nice. And then when Julie described the grip here, I went, that is exactly what it is, because as we go through these wines, every single one of them is going to make your mouth water. And it's one of the sales pitches that I use, but I have to be really careful, because if I lose somebody in the middle of my pitch, it could go really wrong. But one of the things I say is every single one of our wines leave you wanting. Now that's a funny thing to say, except that, from our perspective, we don't think wine should satisfy your mouth. Mm-hmm. We think that it should prepare your mouth for the next bite or the next sip. So every time you take a sip, it should lead you to the next thing. It should leave you wanting the next bite or the next sip.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's intentional. I feel like wines that you put, they're lush, they have this great fruity, almost balmy aroma. You put them in your mouth, and oh man, they're just kind of sweet and fruity and luscious and warming. And it's all of a sudden you go, well, that was good. What else is there to drink? And you're looking around because you're satisfied.
Right. Right.
Well,
Right.
I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to be satisfied. I want you to drain the bottle and order another one.
That's right. Have more. Be wanting.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to try the next Cabernet so I can compare
Okay.
these back to back. So.
No, there's no truth to the rumor that a world famous secret agent was seen skulking about the vineyard.
Oh, okay. I don't know if maybe you were saying that was your other job, was serving as a secret agent or something.
No, we call this the James Bond of our vineyard.
The James
It
Bond.
is Block 007, also planted in the early 1990s. This is now, compared to the three vineyards, this now is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon from a single block on our vineyard. So it gives you an idea. There are some differences, as we were talking about. Ed will do his steak analogy.
Yum.
But there's
Sorry to interrupt, but yum. This is fantastic too. My goodness. But very different.
very different, yes. And being that from that particular block, it is got that little touch of what our winemaker, Monse, she has some great little phrases, and Ed was referring to it earlier as that green herb. She calls it greenier. So there's that little bit of that pyrazine in Cabernet Sauvignon really kind of comes through, and you get that little touch there. But this one, coming from the 2018 vintage, really has some nice, delicate fruit in there to really blend with those notes of the little bit of the greenier, the little dried herb and that kind of thing. So it really comes together very nicely.
Absolutely. It sure does. Wow. I mean, it is. It does. It starts out with a little hint, and then it kind of spreads out and it takes over the whole experience.
Yeah.
So one of the things Monse has done, I think beginning in either the 17 or the 18 vintage, I can't recall which, but she decided she wanted to differentiate this wine even a little bit more. It's a bit of a difficult vineyard block in that it was planted on a Scott Henry trellising system. Quick Google Scott Henry. And it's odd in that it's a double fruiting zone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which I think initially the idea was you get twice the fruit, which, we're farmers at our core. So what do you want? You don't want less fruit, you want more fruit. The reality is that as the vineyard matured, you don't get twice as much fruit. You get maybe a little bit extra, but not twice. And not only that, but you get two different ripening zones.
Oh my goodness. Yes, you do.
So figuring out optimum ripeness for this vineyard really is difficult. And Monse, this is her most difficult wine to make. I love it because I've had the opportunity over the years to taste it as it ages. And that greenier part that she talked, and Monse is from Spain, so some of her idioms are a little bit funny, and we like to use them because they're just so different. But that greenier flavor that she talks about really, really lends to the aging of this wine because it's not a fruit bomb. It's lean, right? I mean, it's lean. It's got high acid. So she started using American oak on this particular wine. She said she wanted something that was maybe a little bit more vanillin to offset that greenier flavor.
Okay.
She didn't think that the French oak profile was what she was looking because this is such a strong flavor in this particular block. She wanted to use something as a foil. So I said that the Three Vineyards was my strip steak. This is the ribeye. And the reason I say it's the ribeye is because if you're a ribeye lover, you love the flavor of beef. You like beef fat, essentially, because ribeyes are really marbled and you get all that flavor. You take a bite of ribeye, there is no question in your mind, it is beef. You pick this glass up, you smell it. There isn't a question in your mind. This is Cabernet Sauvignon.
Right.
And when you get it in your mouth, it's the same thing. It's a little chew. It's got that really nice chew without being. It's not as textural, I don't think, as the Three Vineyards, but it has this almost melt in your mouth. It's not flabby. It's not fatty, but the flavor just continues. And that's the thing with the ribeye, man. You chew it up and swallow it, and you got flavored ribeye in your mouth for 5 minutes until you take another sip, and then you're ready
To have another bite.
have another bite.
Or another sip. Or wanting.
And this one definitely is a bringer wine. I mean, you keep bringing more.
A bringer. And you've got all kinds of words. Julie, is that why you married him? Because of all the words? Did he is he a smooth talker?
A very smooth talker.
Yeah. In kindergarten, I was especially a smooth talker.
Well, yeah, so y'all knew each other in kindergarten, but it was much later that you were married. And I'm just wondering, what is it like, Ed, marrying into a multi-generational winemaking family? What was that like?
It was moving out of this incredible fast-paced pressure, and then trying to and it took me a long time, at least 5 years probably, to slow that down and to start to assimilate to the culture,
like the Borg.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys
resistance is futile. But it's pretty amazing. I mean, for Julie and I to have the responsibility of telling the story, keeping the story fresh, but at the same time, I had a great conversation with Jeff Cranach one time, and he said something to the effect of, "You guys have the greatest story in Dry Creek Valley." And I said, "But Jeff, it's not really a story." And he said, "That's the story.
Right.
The story is, it's not a story.
We just do what we do.
We do it. We go to work every day, and we scratch out a living just like everybody else."
Yeah. But you're doing beautiful things. And I want to see the third wine in our glass, but I don't want to lose that point. Whenever I was there for the 90th celebration, you were putting up the sign that you were certified sustainable.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh yeah, we're putting up the sign today, because that's just how you do things. You didn't do it to get the sign. You were doing what's right to produce the best wine and honor our natural resources, because that's just what you do. And I was really impressed by that.
So wonderful. That program is so wonderful, because a good part of it is the socially equitable part, which has to do with your staff. And it was so funny to me. I was listening to somebody give a pitch about they were certified sustainable, and what that means is, we give our employees vacation and we give them health benefits, and we have all these. And I'm listening to this and I went, "Oh my God, you mean you can use that as a marketing tool?" I didn't know that. I thought it was just what you're supposed to do because these people are part of your family. I mean, we have a small team. We have, less than 20 employees full-time in both the vineyard and the winery. But, we have second, third generation employees. In fact, our DTC manager, Colin's grandfather, worked for us in the tasting room in the 90s.
Love that. Well, there's a reason.
Vineyard foreman's dad worked for us.
Yep. Feliciano first, and Manuel
and
second
then
generation.
And his son worked for us for a while. So we actually had three generations
of the Diaz family.
So
either you don't let them go for some reason and you're hiding some really scary thing, or you
hate confrontation.
You
don't like conflict. So it's like a Supreme Court appointment. Once you get a job at Pedroncelli, you're there for
that's it. Well, something's working. And I think that you must have a lot of wisdom and the multi-generational approach. Hey, I'm going to put some wisdom in my glass because I can always use more wisdom. Ooh, this one is deeper in color for sure.
Yeah. So this, I think, is the 16, right? Is that correct?
It is the 16.
Yeah.
It is. Dry Creek Valley Estate Vineyard, Wisdom,
Mhm.
2016. All right. And it's, again, 300 yards is the full distance of all these. So 3 football fields for the
So yeah,
people in the SEC.
so the Three Vineyards grows
There
right
you
up
go.
close to most of what grows right up close to Dry Creek Road. Then the 007 is across a little tiny ditch called Canyon Creek, which is about midway down. And then this is the furthest distance. This is actually across Dry Creek on the other side on West Dry Creek. This is
This is
that
a
piece
field
Julie
trip,
was talking about.
a whole field trip away.
That's right.
Right. And this is what I was talking about in the beginning, where we first planted Cabernet Sauvignon in 1965. This Wisdom Vineyard was actually, nobody ever hears of Old Vine Cabernet anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, ever. You hear Old Vines in, but you don't hear Old Vine Cabernet.
And we'll
And
talk
so
about that later, right? We're going to talk about Zinfandel
we will.
another time. Mm-hmm.
But this, when it reached, that original vineyard reached 40 years old, it was time to find another to replant. So it was time to replant. So my Uncle John gave the go ahead, and my brother-in-law Lance is our vineyard manager. And so they worked together to pull out the vineyard. And what they did is John actually picked a clone that's a little bit unusual when it comes to Cabernet Sauvignon, even when it comes to what we plant at Pedroncelli. We typically don't do a whole lot of clone following because a lot of our vineyards are older.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he did is pick clone 4, which is the Mendoza clone.
Okay.
And it is a Argentinian. It is used by a few vineyards I know of over in Napa, but very, very little is done with this particular clone. And it's interesting because it's very small bunches. I think that's why you have the concentration that you see in the glass. It's much fuller in color. And it is, he also ended up planting, interestingly enough, a row or 2 of Malbec. We've been making this Wisdom Cabernet since the 2012 vintage. So this is our 4th one. And this one Monse has done a few different things with this Cabernet as compared to the other 2 Cabernets that we had. As far as oak aging is concerned, it's 100% French oak, about 40% new. Barrels are thinner staved rather than, the standard thickness of stave. And as I understand it, and Ed, he explains it very nicely. There's a bit of a difference of why we use thinner stave.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
It was really interesting when Monse told me that. It kind of took me back. It's almost counterintuitive. So they're recommending thinner staves for wines that age longer in barrel and are released later into their life. And it has to do with the transfer of oxygen through osmosis through the barrel. And like I said, it's counterintuitive. I would think that would speed up the aging.
Right.
But for some reason, and I don't understand the science behind it, but I'm a salesman, so I'll make sure that I stay with authority. But what it does do is the slow transfer of oxygen helps develop the wine, but it actually ends up giving it longer life. And so if the wines are intended to age for a longer period of time, it's these barrels that they're recommending. And she does such a beautiful job with this wine. To me, this is the most integrated of the 3. I think all of our Cabernets are really nice examples of Sonoma County Cabernet. And I think it's really important to make that differentiation because they're not fruit bombs and they're not tannin bombs, and you don't have to pull splinters out of your mouth from the new wood that's been used to age, the $2,000 French oak barrels that have been used to age it in. But they're really nice examples of Sonoma County wine. And when I say that, I mean they're kind of medium to medium plus body.
Right.
A little bit higher acidity. Structure is a little tighter on them. They have nice grip. They have nice tannin, but it's not stripping. It's not wood tannin for one thing.
Right.
This wine to me, so this, I gave you New York or strip steak. I gave you ribeye. You might guess this would be the filet mignon. And I say that because I think, as I mentioned, I think it's the most integrated, but I also think it's the most delicate, most tender of the three wines. I think it's a little less aggressive with the pyrazine, but it's there.
I think it's delicate, but it still has a richness to it. The flavor is delicate, but it's also rich. It stays with you. It also leaves you wanting a nut more, but it stays with you a little bit longer than the other two.
Which I love Filet from time to time. But I got to be honest, the thing I love about Filet is that it's such a great conveyor of the flavors around it. You rarely get a Filet on your plate with nothing else. There's either a dollop of blue cheese on top, or a sauce, or some mushrooms. Or something.
Yeah, mushrooms and
the thing
Cabernet.
I've learned about this wine, the thing I've learned about this wine
pepper.
is that it is also such a great accompaniment to what's around it.
Yeah.
I think it's because of it. It's definitely rich, and the length on this wine is amazing.
Yes.
I get something right in the middle of my tongue, just keeps going.
Yeah.
And going. I actually once in a while, and I would recommend on this wine actually decanting it.
Okay, I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you about decanting and aging. So decanting, how long would you decant? An hour, 40, or just?
Well, I would splash it into a decanter. First of all, I wouldn't be careful with it. I'd splash it into a decanter.
Yeah.
Get the air going.
And then serve it over the course of the meal. And I think, if you waited a half an hour before you served, or did it a half an hour before dinner, and then as dinner progressed.
Yeah.
I always say that the best glass of wine in a bottle of Pedroncelli wine is the last glass.
Because the air.
And it's, several reasons. Everybody says, oh, wine opens up. As it aerates, it opens up. Amy, there's short-circuiting part of that conversation. It's not just the wine that opens up. When you sit down at a meal, you've just come off work, or you've met somebody, you're excited to see them, and you have all this energy when you first start in on it. By the time you're toward the end of the bottle, you've relaxed a little bit. You've unwound. And now you're more open. Not only is the wine opened up, but you've opened up. And I think that that's a huge part of wine enjoyment that really doesn't get talked about. But there's a little bit of alcohol effect, obviously. It's having that effect. But your palate no longer has coffee or Pepsi or whatever it was the last, that's cleaned up. Toothpaste.
Well, and your brain is still coming from the other thing too.
Your aftershave or your perfume that you put on just before you went out has calmed down a little bit. So now you're able to smell. And so it's really an interaction. I mean, that's terroir, right? That's the final part of terroir, is the interaction between the human and the wine.
Yeah. And I just wanted to note, this is our 2016. So it is the elder wine vintage among the three that we just tried, a 17 first, an 18, and now the 16. And there's a reason for that, in that we were talking about aging. There's the ageability of the wine, but there's also what we do with the wine before we release it. We bottle it and age it in the bottle for a year before we release it, so that we are affording everyone that little bit of extra time in the bottle. Mostly there's probably 6 months before we release, we're done, we've bottled and then out on the market in about 6 months. But this one, it was intentional, where we wanted to harken back to some of our wines that we made in the 60s and 70s, where they were aged for 3 or more years in some sort of tank or barrel, and then aged in the bottle another year before release, because these were very grippy wines. and it helps. It really just and then we can jump into ageability. So what that does with especially a red wine is if you were to buy a case of this wine and you were to drink a bottle now and then try it a year from now, you just keep going, and it will age. Cabernet Sauvignons especially age so well over time because of the tannin structure. It starts to loosen up a little bit. You are going to, the fruit will dissipate a tiny bit as it goes on through the years. But mostly what you're going to have is just a very nice, complex wine that captures all of those. As it gets older, it gets cedary, a little tobacco-y, a little leathery, a little bit of that. But all of those are just signs of aging. And really just, again, Cabernet, if you were going to put something in the cellar, and especially for wisdom, this would be it. And what's nice is we've already given you a little head start.
Right. You've taken care of some of the discipline for us. Yeah. So we can, because you've already done it, we don't have that responsibility. But if we buy a bottle for now or a case for now and a case for later, we will be rewarded.
That's right.
But you're taking care of a little bit of that for us.
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity last winter. I had a couple of friends came skiing and they were 1978 and 79 were their birth years. But one of them was celebrating his 40th birthday. And so I dug through the deep, dark trenches of the cellar and pulled out a bottle of each. And it was really,
oh my gosh,
fun. It was really fun because they don't taste like these wines.
Right.
But the other thing is you don't get the opportunity to taste a 39 or 40-year-old bottle of wine very often. So even if they're not stellar, they're stellar because it's the experience. And you get to say, well, the 78 held up better than the 79. Well, you can think, okay, well, what were the vintages like? Was it one a hotter year or a colder year? Were there rains? Were there, it's those sorts of things that impact on those wines. And Pedroncelli wines in general, because they're harvested based on pH and acid rather than sugar, that is in balance when you start. And if the wine is balanced when you start, the wine will be balanced when it's finished. Even when it's tired and old, it'll still be balanced. Its components may have gone away,
right?
But everything else in the mouth, that little grippy thing that's happening, is still going to be there 40 years from now.
Oh, I love it.
Well, so just one little meme on the wisdom. I have to share it every time we taste.
Okay, so I'm ready. I've got some to taste while you tell us.
In beer, there's levity. In wine, there is wisdom. And in water, there's bacteria. So choose well.
You heard the wisdom from Ed right here. Choose wisely. Wisdom, choose bacteria, levity, whatever it is, whatever you want. I have really enjoyed tasting these wines with you. And I thought I knew all your stories, but I still have more to learn. I think it's fantastic that they are all so close together, yet they're same grape. We've got a little bit of a blend going on in the first one. Is the third one all Cabernet?
Tiny bit of Malbec.
Tiny bit of Malbec, okay. But yet they have their own influence and their own accents that make them so different. Same winemaker, 300 yards apart, same winery, and yet they can be so different and yet have something that kind of weaves through. I love it. I think that tasting them back to back to back like this is so much fun. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do that and share with everybody out at Wine for Me at Home. Thank you so much, guys.
Our pleasure.
You're welcome.
I think that we should do another episode and we should talk about Zinfandel.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Well, but first, let's close this one out and just leave that cliffhanger of, gosh, I wonder what Pedroncelli Zinfandel is.
So the Cabernets are all about 300 yards apart. The Zinfandels are all within 3 miles.
Is there something about 3 with you guys? So I need to know about this.
There is.
Okay. Well, we'll learn about that one on the next episode. If anyone's watching and does not have these wines, click on over to the Pedroncelli website. It'll be in the show notes. Get these wines, go back and taste them with us while you watch the video. If you're not like dying of thirst right now and have to get it and you're not wanting some more, use the Wine for Me code and you'll get a special kit from Wine for Me that has recipes and a tasting mat so you can taste along. Thanks again, guys. I'm so glad you're here. All right. Cheers.
Cheers. There we go. Boom.
Bing.